Welcome to Food Friends, a podcast inspiring home cooks to try new dishes in the kitchen by sharing trusted recipes, tips, and friendship. Hi, I'm Sonia.
And I'm Carrie. We met in Los Angeles over 15 years ago as personal chefs and haven't stopped talking about food since. We're so glad you're here.
Hi, Carrie.
Hi, Sonia.
So we've talked about grilling in the past, and we'll link to our other grilling episodes in the show notes. But both you and I love vegetables and meatless meals in general, but especially I feel like in the summertime, well, a grilled piece of chicken or a grilled steak or grilled fish, lamb chops, they're all wonderful. Sometimes I feel like I just want a really produce-centric meal that feels lighter and really like embraces the seasonal flavors and maybe puts meat aside for the night.
Yeah, I think people think about throwing a steak or some chicken on the grill, and that's an easy thing to do. And that's always my first instinct too. But this opportunity to char your vegetables and do really interesting things with them, and making a salad on the grill is not always my first thought. But when I make that, I'm always like, wow, I wish I made this more often. So we're doing a completely meatless episode on the grill
with every element of a meal. So your main course, a side, a salad, a dessert even. And I feel like if you do want to keep meat in your menu, if you're hosting or just feeding your family, you can certainly add that to any of this. So I have to start with something that I think this would be a complete meal for me. I wouldn't even necessarily make a salad or sides. There's this recipe on Swin Kitchen called summer ricotta with grilled vegetables. And the photo, for one, is stunning. You look at this and you're like, I get it. This is what I need to serve. And then the recipe is about how to make ricotta at home from scratch, which is so much easier than you think. You and I actually made it, didn't we, for our pop-up?
Yeah,
Did we make it
yes.
then?
And I've made it many times for clients. It's incredibly simple and it tastes so much better than what you can buy at the store, even the most fancy, expensive version. And there's something so satisfying about making your own cheese. The first time I did it, I was like, I can't believe this is happening, but it totally does.
Yeah, you take whole milk, a tiny bit of heavy cream, salt, and lemon juice. That is all you need to make homemade cheese like this. And you're making it over the stove, you're heating the milk, and then eventually you add that acid, stir in that lemon juice, and that's what's going to make the milk curdle and start to form that ricotta texture. And then you drain it, you strain it through some cheesecloth. That's pretty much the whole process. And if you really don't like the idea of this, you can certainly buy store-bought ricotta. But if you've never made it, it's worth it. And then you've made this centerpiece element. And to go around it, it's about grilling whatever vegetables you have in season. She has it scattered on a platter. I might even put it on a sheet pan. She also has grilled, toasted, beautiful, rustic looking bread. So I would do something very similar to what she's recommending. I would very simply oil, salt, and pepper, a bunch of summer squash that's cut into rounds or thinly sliced, some tomatoes, some peppers, maybe some eggplant, some beans or snap peas or whatever you can get, some leeks or summer onions, like those sweet Walla Walla onions. I love those grilled. And then I would get a good loaf of bread, oil that up, grill that, maybe rub some garlic cloves on it afterwards. And then this just rainbow of beautiful vegetables that you slather your bread with that homemade ricotta, you top it with your vegetables. It's basically like having open-faced sandwiches for dinner, but in the summer, that's sort of what you want.
I think it's exactly what you want. And I think people are always, at least I'll speak for myself, I'm always looking for some kind of beautiful grilled vegetable platter. But I have to say, it sometimes can be difficult to make a beautiful vegetable platter seem exciting. And so when you tell people, or you just tell yourself and your family, I made this cheese that I put here, does the recipe suggest that you add anything to the cheese?
No, at the end, you drizzle it with olive oil and finish with salt and pepper. And I love the simplicity because, again, in summer, the ingredients are so good. The vegetables, the tomatoes, the peppers, you don't need to do much to them to make them taste good. To me, this feels sort of like an Italian treatment of a dish, which is don't mess with it. Keep it real simple.
Keep it simple.
Get a good olive oil, one that's like a finishing olive oil. That's what I reserve that olive oil for a salad or a great drizzle on a hummus or on ricotta. It's like the perfect place for it.
I also think this is the kind of dish, if you were going to go to someone's house and they asked you to bring a really nice side or an appetizer, this could be a great appetizer.
That's true.
This would travel. I think you arranged it really beautifully on a sheet pan and covered it, and you could take it with you to a park picnic or something like that. That would be a very exciting discovery if you went to a party and someone brought something like that.
It would be gorgeous.
Yeah.
Well, Carrie, what's your first main dish?
So, my first main dish is buffalo grilled mushrooms. This actually was inspired by you because I know how much you love chicken wings and buffalo chicken. And also, I feel like I really learned how to love mushrooms more because of so many recipes and ideas that we've talked about. And you live in the Pacific Northwest, there's all these very special mushrooms that exist. But I grew up with like canned mushrooms that would be on pizza. So I think I've really learned a love of mushrooms, and this is a recipe by Ali Slagle. This also made me think about when you go to the farmer's market and you see those really big, beautiful masses of mushrooms. They almost look like a work of art. This is kind of where you would use something like that. So one of her big tips is that you don't use portobellos. And the reason is because even though portobellos are meaty, part of what she's encouraging us to do is really put mushrooms on the grill and grill them so that they get really crispy around the edges. And it's much harder to do that with a portobello. So in this case, you're using a really big shiitake, which is thinner than a portobello, or one of those maitake mushrooms. It almost looks like coral. And so you're firing up your grill. She kind of gives instructions if you're using a gas grill or if you're building your own fire on charcoal. I think you could also do this on a grill pan if you didn't want to pull out the
I was
grill.
going to say, you know that I've been using my grill pan to grill mushrooms, and I love grilling oyster mushrooms on my grill pan, which I think is really similar to a maitake in terms of its texture. And if you can't get that at the farmer's market, my favorite place to get those kinds of mushrooms is actually at any Asian market.
Oh, right.
So like an H Mart or a Japanese market.
Yeah. So what you're trying to like achieve these crispy edges. One of her tips is that you sort of build half the fire if you're working with charcoal, or you get your whole entire grill going and then you turn one of your burners off if you're using gas. I use gas. So you kind of have a really hot part of your fire. And then in case there are flare-ups, then you have a cooler part where you can sort of move things over if they need to be moved. You trim your mushrooms, give it a good amount of olive oil, but you don't salt it because, again, you don't want to pull any of that moisture out. And then you put your mushrooms on the grill and you keep an eye on them. You can cover it, you can open it. And when you go out to the grill, she also suggests that you bring a cast iron skillet, which I love to serve in a cast iron skillet. And you put your buffalo hot sauce and a clove of minced garlic in that too. And so once your mushrooms start to get done, you can take your cast iron skillet and put it on that cooler part of the grill. It's not going to be over the heat, but it's going to start to warm up that hot sauce and that garlic. And then you start to transfer your mushrooms when they're done into that hot sauce. You also bring a pat of cold butter. And she really kind of says like you want your butter to remain cold, which I kind of wanted to talk to you about that because what's the difference if the butter starts to melt while the mushrooms are cooking? I'm not really sure.
The pan?
Oh,
to the hot sauce.
You add the butter to the hot sauce and it kind of coats everything. I mean, that's part of what you do with chicken wings, right?
Yes, absolutely. You add butter, or you can actually add non-dairy butter. I've tried it with both, and it works equally well. And I have usually added it cold, but only because I don't always have it sitting on my counter. I don't know what the science behind that is. I wonder if, because sometimes sauces can break, meaning they separate, like the oil separates from the rest. So I imagine the cold butter helps prevent that sauce from breaking and helps it emulsify more quickly.
She basically, I guess that makes sense. She says you like just stir it so that it becomes glossy. And so what you've got are just all these like crispy grilled mushrooms, and then you're putting them into this garlicky hot sauce that's got butter in it. And then she also recommends that you can serve it with a little bit of blue cheese if you wish. And she says like you could just eat them straight from the pan with your fingers, which wow, that sounds great. Or you can serve them on a buttered bun or a buttered roll, almost like a little sandwich. And
I see, it makes it almost like a po' boy or something.
When I was reading that in the description, that's really kind of what sold me on this idea.
It sounds so good. I love a grilled mushroom. You know, I also have another Ali Slagle recipe to offer as my salad grilled option. And I do think her recipes are just consistently so strong. And that's why
Yes.
probably you and I both gravitate to them.
Yeah.
They really work. And it's evidenced by like almost all of so many of her recipes have 5-star reviews, like hundreds or thousands of 5-star reviews. So I think grilled salads are a really interesting category. And I actually even enjoy grilled lettuces, like a grilled romaine Caesar salad. But I'm not talking about that. I'm actually talking about how do you incorporate grilled vegetables into a salad. And I love panzanella. It's something I make about once a summer. I don't make it all the time. But panzanella, of course, is an Italian bread salad. It's where you take a good loaf of sort of stale bread, you rip it apart, and the intention is to use it with really ripe, juicy tomatoes. And their juices sort of get absorbed by the bread and it becomes so flavorful with all that tomato. So this is taking that inspiration, the classic Italian dish, but she's offering a grilled corn panzanella.
Oh, wow. How delicious. I mean,
So
this is what we want in
yeah,
the summer. We want corn, we want grilled corn, we want a salad, all the elements in one place.
and it's relatively easy because the only thing you're going to be grilling is the corn. So it's like having one grilled element. It's not going to take that long alongside a bunch of fresh ingredients. So you have the freshness of cucumber and tomato, which are classic panzanella ingredients, contrasted by this sweet caramelized charred corn. So it's as simple as charring the corn on the grill. And then you take the kernels off the cob once it's grilled, and then you're combining that with thick cuts, big pieces of tomatoes, the cucumbers, the torn bread. She also has fresh mozzarella in this, which I think is great in a panzanella, and then a lot of basil leaves. She also
Wow.
includes shallot. I think a little minced shallot or some thinly sliced red onion is nice here too for a little sharpness. And the thing about it is you do want it to sit for at least 30 minutes before you serve it. So why I like this is it also doubles as a great potluck dish,
Yeah.
a great picnic dish, a great take it in your cooler and go watch the sunset on the beach dish. And it has everything all together and it's so filling. It's almost like a complete meal in itself.
Well, it also requires you to make it ahead. And so if grilling is something that you're not that comfortable with, this is something you can just kind of do on your own time. I mean, it's kind of ideal. It's like an ideal invitation for a really beautiful salad like that.
And I feel like if you really hate grilling, it's still a good recipe. Just use fresh corn.
Right. By the way, great tip too. I also love how much basil is in it. I think there's that basil corn combination is kind of underutilized. The sweetness is actually works really well together.
Yeah.
So, Sonia, I have a really interesting grilled broccoli salad with ciabatta croutons. So mine also has a bread element, which I really like. I love broccoli. It's one of maybe my favorite vegetable. I don't know if I'm willing to say, but grilling broccoli is one of my favorite ways to work with broccoli. And this one is really interesting because it has these very assertive Italian flavors. It's got golden raisins for sweetness. There's shallots, there's sherry vinegar for tanginess, there's garlic, there's Meyer lemon, which I don't love
You
Meyer.
don't love Meyer lemon.
I don't love Meyer
I
lemon, but
do.
I would still do it to see what it tastes like here. And then
You don't need Meyer lemon when they call for Meyer lemon, unless it's like a Meyer lemon tart. You don't need it.
fair enough. I do have a regular lemon tree, so I would probably just pull a lemon off my tree. And then there's rosemary, thyme, and toasted pine nuts, along with the ciabatta. And so what you do is you make a little marinade by boiling together the sherry and the sherry vinegar and some agave and some thyme. And then in two separate bowls, you've got your sliced shallots and you've got your raisins. And so you pour a little bit of that marinade over each of those and you let them sit while you make the rest of the meal. You take some of this marinade and you add Meyer lemon zest and Meyer lemon juice and olive oil. You set a little bit of that aside to drizzle it over the finished dish. And then you take the rest of the marinade and you add more garlic, you add red pepper flakes, you add rosemary, and you brush that all over the broccoli and over your ciabatta too. I think for this dish, you really want pieces of broccoli that are sort of long, that you kind of eat with a fork and knife, I would say. You want them to be like more like spears. And then you grill them. You know, one of the suggestions that the recipe makes is that you get your broccoli charred and then you wrap it in foil to steam it a little bit. I really like my broccoli to be super crisp tender. You can skip that step if
That's
you
a
want.
really interesting. I might actually do it because I kind of like my broccoli softer.
You like your broccoli softer.
Hard take. I mean, when it's raw, I like it raw. Otherwise, I feel like I'm alone in this because I think more people like it how you're describing it.
Well, I mean, listen, my grill has a couple of different levels. You know, there's like the main level, but then there's also like that little shelf. And so I like to get everything laid down on those hot grates and get charred marks. And then once they start to get a little charred place that I want, then I move them up onto the shelf and let them sit a little longer.
Yeah.
You also want to take your bread, and I think it's easier to grill when it's in bigger pieces. And so you get some really great charred spaces on that ciabatta. And then you take everything off of the grill. You can cut the ciabatta if you want. I personally would rip it into smaller pieces so
Me
it's
too.
like kind of craggy. I would arrange the broccoli. I would pour a little bit of the marinade, the rest of the vinaigrette over it. I would add some of the pieces of bread. And then you want to go back to those raisins and those shallots and drain them of that marinade. So the raisins have been like plumping up in this marinade and the shallots are all pickled. And then you kind of add them to your broccoli and then you sprinkle it with pine nuts. And so it's all these really different.
Very Italian.
Oh, very Italian, different flavors, different textures. I think the fattiness of that nut is really nice here. I think it would really temper some of that tanginess of the sherry vinegar.
Yeah, I love those classic Italian combinations. It sounds like elements of caponata, like that
Yes.
vinegariness, the raisin. But I love a charred broccoli in the mix. And I think plumping your raisins, rehydrating them with vinegar, that's something we always did at the restaurant. We had a salad with currants. That was like our house salad. And that we would rehydrate the currants in sherry vinegar.
Oh, wow.
And it made such a difference because they become tangy and soft and sweet, and it's very addictive. And it's so good with all these contrasting flavors. I love these very hearty salads. I think this is also a great entertaining salad, potluck salad, make ahead salad. It's very friendly to all those things.
Yeah, it's also completely vegan.
Yeah.
It's a really thoughtful recipe.
Yeah. And let's be honest, if you're already someone who is thinking about grilling, you understand there's usually more than one step.
Yes.
Like getting out the grill is a step. So if you're already willing to grill something, but again, we've talked about this before, a grill pan can do a lot of this. A very inexpensive grill pan will go a long way. Okay. So I want to bring up a side, but I also feel like this could be a meatless main if you wanted it to be. And in fact, I've served similar dishes as a main. So I think one of the best vegetables to grill is eggplant. It becomes so crisp and charred on the outside and so soft and marshmallowy on the inside. It gets really tender and it brings out all those natural sugars, but there's so much savoriness. I just love a grilled eggplant. And for a lot of vegetarians, and I have been one myself in the past, it feels meaty. So it can be a great replacement if you have multiple kinds of diners at your table. So there's this recipe from the Jelena cookbook, which is one of my favorite cookbooks, which you gave me, by the way. Do you remember?
I do remember because I had two copies.
Yeah.
Someone had given me one copy, and then one of my clients, he had two copies, and so he sent me the other copy too, and then I passed it on to you.
And I think it's an outstanding cookbook. It still holds up. Jelena is still one of my favorite restaurants in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
I just think they do vegetables so well.
They do.
So this is a recipe. I'm going to say this wrong, so please forgive me. Grilled eggplant, mojo de ajo, and basil salsa verde. So most Jelena recipes do have sort of components to it. And I will just say my note is I would do the grilled eggplant and basil salsa verde part of this. And so it's not a complicated recipe in terms of the grilling of an eggplant. You just grill it. Essentially, you cut the eggplants, you slice them into 3/4 inch thick pieces.
So they're
you
really
get, like,
meaty pieces.
they're meaty pieces.
Yeah.
I think you could even go up to an inch. And then you're brushing them. Well, so in this case, you're brushing them with mojo de ajo. If I don't know if I'm saying
I
that
think
right.
you are saying that right.
Okay.
Mojo de ajo is like
It's
it's herbs and garlic.
In this case, it's a garlic that's caramelized in olive oil with lots of fresh citrus. And so you're brushing the eggplant with that. Now, having said that, I don't think I would do that because I feel like that's just one step too fussy. But I would get a really good olive oil. And actually, you can even get infused olive oils and like a good garlic olive oil.
Yes.
I don't buy a lot of those, but someone actually just had gifted me some. And this is the perfect place for it.
By the way,
And
that's
then
a great
yeah,
suggestion. Or if
right?
you have like a lemony olive oil,
A rosemary
yes,
olive oil.
Yes.
We're not talking about synthetic truffle oil. Brush that on your eggplant. And then the part of this recipe that I would make is the basil salsa verde. Salsa verdes are sauces with herbs and garlic and oil, and usually some kind of acidic element like a vinegar or a citrus juice. But I love the idea of making one with basil because a lot of salsa verdes are parsley or cilantro or some combination. And the idea of making with basil is so nice because basil is so abundant in the summer and everyone always goes to pesto. And it's sort of nice to have a break from pesto, but still get all that basil flavor. So the idea of like a beautifully grilled piece of eggplant, those lovely grill marks topped with a bright green sauce, it feels to me like it's a side for sure, but it can be a main.
Yeah, I mean, I really love this idea. And in a lot of ways, I credit you for really pushing me more into loving eggplant. And I do think it's such an easy thing to grill. It's incredibly forgiving, too. This is exactly the place where I would like get it screaming hot and give it some grill marks and then kind of lay it up onto that shelf and leave it there for a while I was doing other things if I was planning to grill other things, to sort of get it charred like that and then serve it with this really basil heavy sauce. It sounds so delicious.
I've served this kind of thing with sfug before, which is a Yemenite hot sauce. I think pesto would work. Like, I think jarred pesto would work. I think the point is make it easy for yourself if that's what you're looking for, or make it as complicated as you'd like if that's what you're looking for.
Totally. So, Sonia, I have a really great side too. Charred snap peas with an aioli. And I think in this case, if you had snap peas, we sort of have them all summer long. You can also get them at the grocery store. But I think this is also a place where you could use a Romano bean, any of those gorgeous beans that you see at the farmer's market, or sometimes you would have them at the grocery store. But also, green beans are so plentiful in the summer. And I would definitely say don't use like the haricot vert, the really skinny ones. This is where you want a big green bean, especially if you're taking them out of your garden or something. But what I like about this is that when you grill these beans, you're really taking a veggie and you're serving it with this like decadent aioli sauce. And the recipe calls for you to make a homemade aioli. I gotta tell you, I'm not making a homemade aioli unless you have built a whole menu around making aioli, which I think that's a summer ritual for some people. That's very common in Europe. You make a homemade aioli and then you've got like fish and all these vegetables. This would be a great dish if you had done that and you had a little bit of aioli left, because what you're doing is you're thinning your aioli with a little bit of buttermilk. So you're adding a little bit of tanginess. And what I think is smart about this recipe is it calls for 1.5 or 2 pounds of beans, and you separate the beans. And so you take half of them and you grill half, and the other half you slice lengthwise so you can see all the beans inside. So you have like a grilled element and you have this raw element. And when you go to serve it, I think taking your plate or your bowl or your platter and kind of smearing this aioli on the bottom of the plate and then piling your beans up on top. And then the suggestion is to add oil-cured Calabrian chilies. You could use those if you had them. You could also just take some jalapenos or some Fresnos, shave them really thin, and add some chilies on top, which I think would be really great to temper some of the sweetness of the beans that you're working with.
Well, I love that you brought up Calabrian chilies because I also think a Fresno chili or any kind of one of those summer red chili peppers that you see, they're always at the farmer's market.
Yeah.
They're always at the grocery store. A Calabrian chili, of course, you can get jarred at any sort of Italian shop or specialty food store. They're all so lovely with something bright green and something grilled. And a grilled Romano bean is one of my top grilled vegetables ever. I think you and I had this amazing Caesar salad at Superba.
Oh, that's
in
right.
Los
We
Angeles.
did. Yeah.
And it was a Caesar salad and it had lettuce, but it also had grilled Romano beans mixed in. And I remember thinking, this is a revelation. So I feel like this is similar because aioli is essentially Caesar dressing. But a buttermilk aioli, if you're adding buttermilk to aioli, honestly, that sounds like ranch
It's
dressing.
very ranchy. I mean, you know,
Ranch
yes.
is mayonnaise and buttermilk or sour cream. So I feel like even if you made a gussied up mayonnaise, and I think the key is the grilled, whether it's a snap pea, a string bean, or a Romano bean, all of those things when they're grilled are just so much better. Charred beans, yum.
Yeah, charred beans and also mixed with the raw bean that's kind of sliced. And, you know, if you don't have buttermilk, add some lemon to it, add a little bit of garlic to it. I would make this maybe once a week or every other week in the summer.
Yeah, it's a perfect summer side. Well, we have to talk about something sweet to end your meal with. I actually think grilled fruit isn't done enough. And there's something that happens to fruit when you put it on a grill. It really transforms it, much like we talked about with the eggplant. So there's this recipe for Brazilian grilled pineapple that I love, and it's as simple as can be. It's just coating pineapple spears or big chunks of pineapple in brown sugar and cinnamon.
Oh,
And
wow.
something happens on the grill when it's coated in that brown sugar and cinnamon specifically. I really wouldn't skip either. I wouldn't swap it for regular sugar. I would really keep it with the brown sugar. It becomes so caramelly, and then the acidity of the pineapple just shines. I would serve it with coconut ice cream or coconut sorbet
Oh,
and
wow.
make it a really special dessert. But I also have to say, I would do the same thing and add some mango pieces too, because back to what I said about eggplant, it becomes kind of marshmallowy. I think grilled mango also becomes marshmallowy. And I love the combination of both grilled mango and pineapple together. So I would really just grill a bunch of fruit, have it coated in this sugar and cinnamon. It's going to have so much flavor. I might even squeeze a little bit of lime juice on top and then serve that with a great coconut sorbet. Or if you hate coconut, choose another sorbet or ice cream. Even vanilla ice cream would be amazing here.
I mean, first of all, I love this idea because you can go to the grocery store and just buy like a whole pineapple that's already just been cored. So you're just kind of like slicing it. And I've never thought of grilling mango, literally never in my life. Throwing that idea in there is so brilliant. I think it's really sexy because you're putting all of these charred pieces on your fruit. You're still getting the benefits of the fruit, but with this extra element, which I think is so amazing. It's funny, my dessert also has pineapple in it, but it's this mixture. The recipe is called grilled fruit en papillote, which basically means you put it in a wrapper and throw it on the grill. When you're at a campsite, you can kind of wrap things in tin foil and seal it up and cook it. And that's exactly what you're doing with this fruit. I think the combination of fruit they're suggesting is really interesting. So it's halved apricots, chunks of pineapple, pitted cherries, coconut or flaked or fresh, you can use either, pistachios, 2 whole vanilla beans that you have split and cut into thirds, cinnamon sticks that you've snapped in half, 6 teaspoons of brown sugar, and 6 teaspoons of butter. So the suggestion is for 6 people and that you're making 6 of these little packages. Honestly, I think you could also just make one big packet, get a big piece of tinfoil and put all of this in and mix it together. But there's a couple of really specific tips which I think are really helpful. One of which is you wrap it up together, and then when you put your little packets on the grill, you want your seam to be pointing up. You don't want to like point your seam down just because you don't want to lose all of that juice. The idea is that you also get it on the hot part of the grill, and then you move it over to the cooler part of the grill to sit. I have a son, he's 9. I could really give this to him as his job. He could put together all these little packets of fruit. And after I've grilled dinner, you put those little packets on the hot part for a couple of minutes, and then you just turn off the grill and close it and let it sit and be warm while you're eating your dinner. To your point too about serving the grilled fruit with some kind of great ice cream or sorbet, that's exactly what they suggest you do. If you're doing it in 6 individual little packets or 4 individual packets or how many people are at your table, every person gets to open up their little packet and pour this caramely, buttery, soft fruit all over their ice cream. What a beautiful way to end a meal.
Yeah, I guess that's the point of a grilled fruit. Pair it with something rich and creamy.
Yes.
And it just becomes heavenly. Well, Carrie, these are all really great ideas. I definitely feel like I'm going to be grilling more this summer than I have in the past. And I love having a lot of variety in what I can grill and not just relying on the same staples of burgers and chicken and hot dogs. This is so much more expansive to think about.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think I always get such great ideas from you. I don't know that I would have picked that recipe from Jelena, even though I own that cookbook. It's always great to hear what other people's ideas are. And I think it also helps to talk out.
100%. Couldn't agree more. Well, until next time.
Until next time, bye. Thanks for being our food friend.
If you enjoyed our podcast, please subscribe, leave us a review, and share this episode with friends. We love hearing from you, so follow us on Instagram or drop us a line at foodfriendspodcast.com.
Yes, we'd love to hear from you and your food friends. Happy cooking and eating.